Oh, today's a goodie. So today we're going to talk about the console wars. Sony versus Microsoft, Nintendo versus, well, everyone. We defended our plastic boxes and argued about this till we're blue in the face. But you know what? What if everything we thought about that was completely wrong? What if the battle isn't between the hardware, but somewhere else entirely? So come with us as we go through consoles' biggest rivalries, and trust me, you might not like what you hear. Let's do this.
Dan and Dan with a gaming flair, pixel dreams and worlds to share, joystick tales and button cues. Welcome to Gaming Views.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all gaming ages, welcome to the main event. Broadcasting live from the Digital Coliseum, it's Gaming Views. To my right, one of your referees for the evening's events, retiring from pro wrestling at the tender age of 30, he was known for his epic ladder and steel chair fights. The king of questions, the prince of podcasting. Give it up for Dan Francisco P. And as ever, I'm your other F, Danny Boy, Dark Souls H. But tonight, we ain't here to talk about ancient history, high scores, or Twitch gaming. No, tonight, we're stepping into the squared circle, where pixelated pride and console supremacy are on the line. That's right, folks. Get ready for a matchup of epic proportions as we witness the console wars. Let's get ready to rumble! I need lozenger now.
Well done. Wow. What an intro. What an intro. I mean, firstly, you got me retiring quite young. I'm a lot older than that.
I thought it was your knees.
And yeah, and third, where was number two? And secondly, you've got me actually sort of being sporty, so I like that. That has never been a thing in my life. But
I know you like wrestling, Dan. I
love wrestling, yeah.
I know you love wrestling, so I thought I'd treat you to a bit of a wrestling vibe tonight.
Oh, what an intro. What an intro. I'm glad we didn't almost break up twice before we started recording for various reasons, so I get to hear it.
We'll get to that. I may have been mistaken. Do you know what? I'm fed up with Joey being right about shit. That's what I'm fed up with. All right, I'm going to have words.
Joey, you've almost caused the band to break up, Joey. Just letting you know.
Nearly. Yeah. Very nearly. I'll forgive him this once. Right, what are we on? We're on episode 13.
Yes,
It's getting so many I've forgotten.
Yes, it is.
Yes. And I think it's worthwhile me mentioning last time we did promise this time would be a guest that we were both super excited about, and unfortunately the guest had to postpone. So we are still planning that episode. It will just be in a little while, not quite yet.
You've still got Dan and me.
But unfortunately fortunately you've still got Dan and I together as a band thing, podcast, whatever it is.
Just about.
So, Dan, instead of me asking, what have you been playing? I'm going to ask, what have you been reviewing?
Oh, I love that. So, canny viewers and watchers of podcast feeds will have noticed that, well, on Friday, I was going to say today, but we're recording this a few days earlier than this goes out. So, Friday, just gone, you would have seen a cheeky little extra episode pop into your Gaming Views feed. And it's the first episode of a new sub-series that Dan and I are going to do called Gaming Reviews. So
clever.
It's great, isn't it? So Dan and I basically are getting the opportunity to play some games, and we are then going to record what I call bite-sized episodes of our thoughts and views and put them out there. So yeah, as of now, God of Weapons is out there. That'll played on the Xbox. You'll have another one. Actually, I think you're going to have another one for the next few Fridays. So yeah, keep an eye out on that. But yeah, I was quite excited about that, although it felt weird doing an episode without you on the other side. So I think for the next one, I just want you on screen.
It's strange. I think it might be even weirder for me though, my friend, because you've been doing this podcasting malarkey quite a long time and I haven't. And so you've also done solo episodes and I never have. So when I do one, and that's not why I'm postponing it, and it's not because they're all about cats. And it's not because the first one I'm going to review, spoiler alert, is a little bit jank. I think it's going to be even weirder for me not being able to bounce off of someone, in that way. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. It could be absolutely terrible. I was recording something for this episode, actually, and my wife came in the room and went, "Are you brushing up on your acting skills?" And I was like, brushing up implies I had any to begin with. I'm like, no, go away.
Do you know what? It took me, well, I didn't do a solo episode for about 3 years, and yeah, even then it just felt so awkward because, you know, the whole thing about this is we're just talking to each other, isn't it? So take half of that out and in
my house, I talk to myself quite frequently because it's the only way to get a sensible conversation. But doing that in front of a camera and all the things that come with it, you know, a little bit strange, but yeah, there we go. Anyway, gaming reviews, keep your eyes and ears out for those. They'll be on all good pods and on YouTube. Please do like and subscribe. You and I brush over that too frequently, but it does mean the world to us when you do that. And you know, please comment. We will come back to you. We try and answer all comments because even the mean ones, which we haven't had any yet, but I'm sure they'll come in. So yeah, please do like and subscribe to the podcast and Spotify, Apple, everything.
You can also hear more Dan H this week as well. We went solo on me. You appeared on Tsunami, didn't you? So that episode aired the Friday just gone as well, I think it was. So yeah, I know I'm a bit biased, but I listened to it and I thought you were flipping brilliant. I thought it was a great chat.
Very kind of you.
And also,
Satsu's
Josh,
a lovely host.
And I just wanted to say, I can't remember if I told you, but Josh Scar from Talking Smack message read to say he really enjoyed it as well. That you know, you're a really good guest on it. So yeah, well done.
Oh, it's very, very kind of him to say so. Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Satsu, for having me. It was a wonderful evening spent talking about this. And unlike today, it was actually relatively okay temperature wise. For us, the podcasting gods seem to hate us, and every time we record on a Friday they go, "Yeah, have a minor trip to hell for an hour and a half and boil your bits off." So yeah, thanks for that again, podcasting gods. I don't know what they'd be called, but right. So yeah, we had a little skirmish just before we started, didn't we? Because
it was getting that way.
Let me give some context. So Joey kindly reached out to Dan, Joey of GCP, kindly reached out to Dan, and with a really helpful comment about last week's episode, which was all about failed consoles, and I brought up the Wii U. Which was maybe slightly controversial, but Joey decided to chip in and said he had a Wii U, which I think he said, did he have it given to him?
He said it was shit. He only had it because his brother Tim gave it to him.
Yeah, Tim gave it to him and it was shit. So, you know, I mean, fair enough if you're going to chip in. But he did add on the end, the only reason it was good was because Breath of the Wild was on it. And I said, fucking wasn't. And you said, it was. I looked it up and I was like, I'm adamant. It absolutely wasn't. It can't have been. It was on the Switch. Turns out you and him were right.
Well, no, he was right. I mean, I'm not going to profess to know. I was looking at it and no, yeah, because he said it was actually made for the Wii U, so it ran better than the Switch. And he was saying, but it wasn't on the Switch. And I said, but I'm looking at it here. It was. And he said, it's not. And I'm like, but I'm looking at it here. It was. And you were like, I'm telling you, Dan, it wasn't.
I'm hanging up my gaming cap. I think I've embarrassed myself enough tonight, Dan. So I'm just gonna lay down my swords and I'm not gonna play the game anymore. But actually, having said that, as a prize for Joey getting it right, even though we weren't arguing, you and I were, I'm gonna do the nice thing and play a trailer from the boys over at GCP.
Welcome to my friendly game club where everyone is welcome. The podcast where we share, we play, we run and sing. Well, we don't run, but we do sing.
Hey kids, are you looking for a new favourite fortnightly video game review podcast?
Then boy howdy have we got the show for you.
We take a different game every 2 weeks and we review them just like a book club.
You can find us on all good podcasting platforms.
And some of the sketchy ones too.
Simply search for the Game Club podcast and join the club today.
Sorry, I was laughing through that because it just hit me, you know, them doing a trailer like a kids' TV show, but when you see them, they'd look at home on the cover of a heavy metal album cover, wouldn't they?
100%. And I'm not going to say, I was going to say I'd lock your kids up if I saw them coming, but I didn't mean that in that way.
Moving on, we haven't got lawyers sorted out yet.
No, we haven't. Sorry, GCP. We love you guys. Right. Today we are talking about probably one of the most controversial topics ever to grace consoles, those little plastic boxes we all love, and that is the idea of console wars, which is a term that's been bandied about for quite a long time, and we'll get to how long exactly. But when we talk about console wars, what do we mean, Dan? So we're talking about the intense competition among video game console manufacturers, which is driven by technological innovation, exclusivity, so game content, exclusive gaming, marketing strategies, different business models. So all of these kind of amalgamation of different things, that's what we're talking about when we talk about console wars. And the other thing that kind of overlays that is something that some people like and find funny, some people go and get aggrieved with, we have no part of, which is that whole element of fanboyism.
Fanboy, yeah.
Fanboyism, right? And flame wars and all this nonsense and all this language and things that's built up over this stuff. It's crazy, right?
I don't get it, and we'll come on. We'll, as we talk about it, we'll kind of give our views on it, I'm sure. But something that we have said so long is a subject that gives us so much pleasure. And look, I would say the majority of people is just they enjoy it and they love it and they can share it without sort of getting embroiled in this. But throughout its history, again, this has just persisted. Now, even sort of in the old days before like the World Wide Webs and all that, it was the same, but we called it playground wars. You know, it was like playground wars. It was, and the same thing is just it was on a much more local level. And I kind of understand it. I get why it's there, but I've never understood why it's persisted so long.
And when we talk about length, it's longer than I suspected.
Yes.
So when someone says to you console wars, where does your mind go to kind of like where it must have started then?
Well, I think you'd go to, well, for me, I would go to the, was it the Mega Drive, Genesis, and was it the Super Nintendo? I lie a little bit because, but just based on my own experience, I would have said the Commodore 64 against the Spectrum, because even back then there was kind of battles, right? Plus the
consoles specifically though.
Not
but I get where you're going.
Yeah, then you had the Commodore Amiga against the Atari ST. My mind would go back there, but yeah, specifically I think it would be the Genesis.
I think it's even earlier than that. So it's even earlier than your Commodore. So the first competition was actually kind of the very late 70s. We're talking 77, the Atari 2600 was released. And then just after that, Mattel released the Intellivision, which was 79. And that was really the first time that two consoles had hit the market in a very similar space of time and started competing at a level that was about the hardware and the graphics, 128 color. Hold on. 128 color, 160 by 102 res. Careful, Dan, because you're going to get a bit frightened now. 128 bytes of RAM. Jeez. And 4 kilobytes of ROM cartridge. We're talking a Tron territory, right? Right. Playing games like Space Invaders and Asteroids. So this was the first time that two competing consoles had hit the market. Now, you're right. It wasn't actually until a bit later, and we're talking late 80s, mid 80s maybe, when you had the NES and the Master System, which were your kind of 8-bit contenders, that the phrase console wars actually started appearing. And it wasn't everywhere. It was in a couple of papers in the US, but that's when it actually started appearing as a phrase in terms of
what a shock that it's the tabloids or the media that's starts
weird, isn't it?
I think
weird,
that's
isn't it?
Unbelievable.
But you're right. It didn't really become common until we started talking about the Nintendos and Segas. And that was specifically the SNES and the Mega Drive. And one of the first things that happened, because they were the ones with the kind of iconic mascots, your Sonics, your Marios, Zelda, those sort of amalgamation of various characters that really were iconic for each system. And it was actually upon the release of Altered Beast, which the Mega Drive was slightly ahead of the SNES. So they effectively came into the market almost competing against the NES. So 16-bit versus 8-bit. And it was the guys over at Sega who came up with the phrase, Genesis does what Nintendo don't, which I always love. I love a little play on words.
It's brilliant. I mean, it's a brilliant play on words, but it is a bit naughty in that sense, isn't it?
And it won't be the first instance of where we see this kind of behaviour, right? Because there's very few direct attacks from competitors across, even up until today. And it's almost been done in a clandestine, either marketing or how they're talked about, that becomes the point rather than a direct attack, apart from a couple of instances, which we'll talk about a bit later. So yeah, Sega had this whole thing about marketing as a more grown-up alternative to Nintendo's more family-friendly piece. But Nintendo did get their own back. So when Donkey Kong Country released in 94, Nintendo basically released a statement basically saying, where are you going to play it? Not on the Genesis. So they, they did a little bit too. They were a little bit cheeky.
Well, that's the origins then of the whole exclusivity then that we see nowadays, right?
Well, the exclusivity thing's a very interesting piece because I talked a little bit about kind of the original battle, the Atari and the Intellivision. But in about 83, there was call it the death of the console market, right? And whether it was a downturn in the economic market in the US or these things weren't just selling. And it wasn't until Nintendo released the Famicom on the NES. Famicom 83 in Japan, but it didn't get to the US until I think it was 85. So you had almost a 2-year gap where not much was happening. But actually it was Nintendo's approach to licensing and modeling and things for games. So, they didn't really open up a broader market and have all of their titles were pretty much exclusive if you look at it that way. Do you know what I mean? So they didn't really have much of a great approach to an open and working with developers kind of strategy. And neither did Sega, to be fair. And we saw that as we moved through the generations, and Sega then went on to release the Dreamcast, and that kind of failed almost epically because of that very reason. There were very few developers for it. So you had Nintendo and Sega, very much rivals in a 2-horse race at that point. Yeah. So it was just the two of them. As I said, Sega very much marketing older players. Nintendo were very much family orientated, kind of still stuck to that kind of Zelda and, don't worry, you can still play with us in a more family friendly way, even to the point where Sega jumped on the whole piece around Nintendo releasing a clean version of Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Which in itself is weird, right? I mean, if you're going to release it, how do you clean up a game like Mortal Kombat?
Yeah, well, we did talk about a little bit briefly, didn't we, in the controversies about the whole, it was the reason why the ESRB was brought in, wasn't it? And yeah, I guess as a kid, the only reason you played Mortal Kombat was to see that gore and blood. Otherwise, you could just play any other fighter, right?
100%.
You've taken out the key element of it. Yeah.
It was the USP. It was that unique selling point of Mortal Kombat was the fatalities and the ripping of heads and the gore and the blood, and it's what separated it from your Street Fighters and your your other Virtua Fighter and things like that. So it was an odd thing to do. Go, we'll do a cleaned up version. And so I think Sega ripped them a little bit for that. And remember, Sega they were quite westernized, although being a Japanese company. So they released a lot of licensed products in the US, particularly like Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, yeah. Mike Tyson. So he was, they paid him a bunch of money to do stuff. So they were almost seen as the confrontational bad boys of the console world.
Was it almost like the Pepsi to the Coca-Cola, weren't they?
Yeah.
They tried to be the hip
exactly,
cool thing,
the hip cool people. Yeah. So, and what was interesting to bolster that marketing strategy and put that into people's consciousness, they came up with what they call the Sega Scream, right, which everyone now knows, right?
Yeah.
That vocal hit that kind of Sega in splits up into 2 bits, but that was on every game, every cartridge you loaded. It was on all the adverts. It was an attempt to get that into the consciousness of people to kind of go, oh, it's Sega, and to be this good takes ages as well, which was one of their other marketing slogans that did it. Nintendo, on the other hand, as I said, much more family focused, relied more on establishing home built icons. Rather than licensing models like Mario, like Donkey Kong. So they were very much sticking to their guns, which I think you even see to this day, right? That is Nintendo's way.
Yeah, it's still the same. And the thing I was looking at when I was looking this up, so you mentioned about the Genesis does what Nintendo don't, but they also, to go on about how Sega, that is, try to be the edgier company. Yeah. You said yourself, like Sonic v Mario, so you've got the speedster against the plumber, the portly plumber who's going, long levels. But, they would often in adverts say, yeah, like I've got a quote here, while Nintendo plays with Mario, Sega has the power of blast processing, because they called their internal blast. It's all the wording, isn't it? The psychology, it's
but it's a
fascinating.
really important point that you raise, is that in the early days of what we call the console wars, it was very much hardware focused. And that's going to be a key point as we move through this, because they all focused on, if you remember those times, and some of us are old enough, we remember those times, you went 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit, and it was almost in the next console's going to double what was before. That's the important bit, right? Or you came up with a unique name for it, like, your blast, whatever it was, or the emotion engine, or what, all of these terms are designed, they don't really mean anything, but they're designed to get hold of people and draw them in.
But all the consoles, the Mega Drive, the name, the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, these consoles, the names themselves, the Atari Jaguar, what's a Jaguar got to do with anything? But
well, even cool Genesis name in the US, almost like it hits that biblical note for the US audience, because they're like, and it also implies the very first of its kind, which, from a 16-bit console, it certainly was, but it's almost like going, nothing that came before us was any good. It's a real,
just stick almost Super in front of it,
totally, which Nintendo then did. Famicom or Nintendo. So and quite often in that early day as well, big thing was around the sound. So certainly for the SNES, the sound piece was, more orchestral, more versatile than Sega's. And I think it was a running joke back in the day, and certainly Super Mario World, which came out with the SNES, the number of orchestra hits as a note that game played, it was almost repetitive to the point where it was just continual. That orchestra hit note just kept coming and coming. A lot of games used it because the SNES was capable of doing it. It came as annoying as Comic Sans as a font. Do you know what I mean? It was so frustrating. But Genesis games were often criticised for having crunch noises or robot farts, as they were called. That kind of So there became this running battle over, even then, between gamers who were like, but our sound's better than yours.
But again, that's a thing through time. Like I think the Commodore 64 had this. Was it the SID chip? I think that's what it was. And when it was a battle between, I'll bring it up again, the Amiga and the Atari ST. Like the Amiga, if I remember right, was supposed to have the better graphics, but the Atari ST was used by people who were making music, and it's like, oh, who cares about graphics? I can make really good music. Well, I can play great games, or good-looking games. And it's just so funny what we cling on to, isn't it? In the quest of proving that my bit of plastic is better than your bit of plastic.
Totally that. And that's why the bit strategy was so effective. Because it was something very simple that consumers could cling on to and hold on to and take in and go, right, that was 8-bit, and then it's 16, then it's 32, because even some people can do simple maths. So, it was easy for them to kind of go, well, I know what the next thing's going to be. And as soon as I see that drop, that's the thing that's going to be bigger than the last thing. We've covered kind of those, and we get to kind of now the 90s, right? So we've got Nintendo and we've got Sega, established console makers. They've both been through at least 2 evolutions, the NES, the SNES, the Master System, the Mega Drive. And in walks, or should I say swaggers, into this 2-horse race, the brash new boy, Sony.
Get in there.
Who get in there. And we've talked about how they came into this in a previous episode, and we'll link it at the top, and please go and watch it, because it's fascinating insight into how Sony were actually formed and delivered the PlayStation 1 off the back of a fallout with Nintendo.
Which, sorry, I want to say I love that anger-fueled, right, we're going to, you break up with us, we're going to destroy 100%. You. I love it.
They were totally the jilted lover, weren't they? That's it. I'm going to destroy your home now. They were bunny boilers.
Yeah. Oh, it's superb. I just, as a story, I love it. Yeah. Go check it out. Yeah.
So Sony comes swaggering in, and what do they bring with them? CD-ROM technology, which at the time, in a world of cartridge-based systems, blowing on your cartridge, which never worked, by the way, but it was supposed to. The other thing they bought, Dan, and this is what's important and links back to what I said about this licensing model that Nintendo had and how they decided to produce a lot of in-house games and weren't very developer-friendly. So the thing that Sony brought with them that was just so key to their success, and to this day still is their developer-friendly approach and environment.
Yeah.
They create an environment where developers have access to a system that they can, and still do, and you can see this when the PlayStation 5 was announced. I don't know if you remember this. Mark Cerny, who's the chief architect over at Sony, actually delivered like a 30-minute architectural talk about the design of the actual No gamer in their right mind gave a toss, right? I watched it because I'm a bit of a nerd, but no one really cared. They just were like, can I see games? Can you just skip the boring bit and show me the games? But they went into very detailed descriptions of how the whole thing hung together and how important what it was. And it almost felt like a thing you would send to developers to say, this is how you put it together.
Do you know what, though? You're right. I'd completely forgotten about that. But again, what to use that term, the fanboys do, though, is they cling on to things. So the argument had always been sound, then it was graphics, then it was mascots like Sonic v Mario. Then it was all about teraflops. Wasn't it? But, when the Xbox, and then you've got people who may not necessarily understand all the internal gubbins of a console or never wanted to, but all of a sudden are spouting tech spec sheet because they know that bit there is better than the Xbox.
Exactly.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And you see that evolution and all the comparison charts that they bring out. And they'll do it to this day, and they'll do it in the next console round, right? In the next round, you'll get the comparison sheets. This does this better than this, and this does that better than that. But for most people now, they've got to the point where the market's so saturated in terms of the volume and selection of what they can have. They don't really care.
It's going to play FIFA and Call of Duty, so that's all they're going to care about.
Right, exactly that. So Sony enters the market, as I said, swaggers in, kind of this dev-friendly creation that they've got, brings with it 3D graphics, which up until that point, the closest you got was Nintendo's attempt at, kind of F-Zero and things like that. There wasn't, which was more scaling than it was 3D.
Yes.
So Sony bring that with them. Also, themselves bring a bunch of great games, right? So their mascot was, I guess at the time, was kind of Crash Bandicoot. That was kind of the start off. They also had Medal of Honor, which was unique.
We've discussed that here.
Nintendo around that time also then released the N64, which had GoldenEye and its own 3D offerings, so Legend of Zelda and Mario World 3D. Interestingly though, and this is key to that point about developer friendly environments, it's at this moment that one of Nintendo's biggest supporters in games development jumps ship over to Sony because of their ability to allow them the freedom to develop and certainly market the games in their own way. And that was Square Enix. So it's at this point that probably one of the biggest entries in the series moves over to Sony, and that was Final Fantasy VII.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, so have you heard about Final Fantasy VII? I don't know if you ever heard of it. Okay, so they left. They basically two fingers up to Nintendo and went over to Sony because they had a better understanding of what developers wanted to do and how the market was changing. So, and I suspect that came from years of their other electronics businesses and running those in a way that they knew competition, brand, market, in a much more self-aware way than Nintendo probably did. So Sega, where are they? They still got a foot in the market, right? So they're still there. They've got their Dreamcast, which initially showed real promise. But unfortunately, it didn't gain the traction that it needed to become a player in the market. Although it had great feedback about, graphics and capability, and it had a network capability as well. It essentially got decommissioned in 2001. So, stopped sales. And so what happened was you had a 2-horse race again. You just had Nintendo and you'd swapped out Sega for Sony. Must be something to do with the S's. But in that race, there was only ever going to be one winner. And I think that was to a surprise of a lot of people who'd grown up with Nintendo, that Sony outsold the thing Nintendo offered massively. But what Nintendo were able to do, maybe ironically, as part of the, let's call it bullying they got from Sega, was carve out this very family friendly niche, which is going to be key to their success later down the line.
Yeah. And that's what I'd picked up. And we've said it before. So, you know, in the end, you've got then the recent years of Sony v Microsoft, right?
Yep.
And I think Nintendo have been happy just almost to sit there with their bucket of popcorn, haven't they? Because
all
they
day
don't
long.
care about that anymore.
They don't.
Because their following is still so massive in terms of they know who their market is, and the market is quite loyal in that respect.
Exactly. And I said in the opening, you know, two things. I said, you might not like what you're going to hear, but you also, everything we think we know about console wars might actually be wrong, particularly now. And we'll talk about market diversification and what happened. Oh my God, I'm sounding like the beginning opening crawl to a Star Wars movie done by George Lucas in his later years. It'll be about tax and God, stop it. Right. But we will talk about that in an entertaining way. But what it was showing at the time is that this hardware war, console war, was evolving to move past just being about hardwares, but it was encompassing the entire ecosystem. So it was more around how developers could get on board with these things, because more and more studios were opening. So it wasn't just about how can I do the thing I do really well and drive that, because that's only going to get you so far. You needed to broaden your market and do that in a really smart way, which is essentially what Sony did to become so successful with the PlayStation. And then inevitably the PlayStation 2, because, you know, one thing they can do is really cleverly strategize names.
Yeah.
They can count.
Yeah.
Unlike someone else, they can do 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5. So Sony can do that. Microsoft can't. So then they released the 2. I was going to say they do a number 2, but that's just not right, is it?
They released a 2 is still just as bad. But
So they released the number 2. These are kind of now the modern titans of gaming, right? So we've moved past and you got rid of your Segas, you got rid of your Ataris, you got rid of your Mattels. You've now moved into where we are today, which is essentially your Sonys, your Microsofts, and your Nintendos. So turn of the millennium, we've gone into a whole new era of competition, because you've got your PlayStation 2 launching and now Microsoft coming up behind with its Xbox. And again, we'll put the link in. Go and have a watch of the Xbox episode, because again, it's another fascinating insight into how that console got made, what drove Microsoft to do it, why they wanted to compete, and how it came to market. So Microsoft now tip up, and you've now got the big 3. And this is where that diversification and different strategies and this segmentation of the market really starts to happen, because very shortly after launching, in fact 12 months exactly after launching, Microsoft did something that neither of the other two had considered, because they themselves, again, you can see because they come from the PC market, very cleverly decided to launch online gaming capability with Xbox Live. So that was their kind of thing. You know, Sony had come in and wiped the board because they'd gone, right, well, we're going to do CD technology and we're going to, you know, bring 3D to the thing and be clever about how developers are used. Microsoft come in and go, well, we've seen a thing over there we can go and do. And they've done that. And I'm not saying it led to them being super successful and winning the console wars, but it did do something else for them, which is something they play on a lot these days. So that was 2001, the launch. 2002, Xbox Live tips up. Again, noticeable differences between the consoles. The Xbox, as we've said, had an 8 gig hard drive, which differentiated it in the ability to, you know, save your games instead of on a memory card. You could save it direct to the console. You could, you could save music down, all those sorts of things. PS2, and meanwhile, had the ability to play DVDs. They created an entire catalogue of different characters that they could fall back on and develop games for. So they really were starting to expand and build on that. So you had your Metal Gear Solids, you had, you know, all of these sort of games that Sony were so great at churning out content that was, you know, libraries of games that had unique storytelling or, you know, were exclusives, right? And we talk about exclusive. Yeah. I know you've got some points on exclusivity as well. And Nintendo, meanwhile, quite happily sitting in the corner, like you said, with their bucket of popcorn, doing their thing. So, you know, they bring out the GameCube, which was unique in itself. And again, not wanting to toe the line. I'm going to put a disc in it, but I'm not going to do the disc you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a little disc. It's going to be very different.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on something. You said that, this is a generation then where it became less about the hardware and then it became all about the games and the exclusives. And something really valid you said that early on, even though the 360, I think is safe to say, kind of not dominated, but was probably the consumer winner in that phase when it came out. Look back at it, right? And Nintendo, you know, you've got Super Mario and Zelda you can associate. PlayStation, Crash Bandicoot. I mean, even for some people, Spyro. You've got Metal Gear Solid, the Final Fantasies. What was synonymous with the Xbox? Possibly Fable, possibly Gears of War, but they were games
Halo
rather
was
than
kind of the
Oh, actually, yeah, okay, Halo. So maybe Master Chief, but those were game franchises. Whereas it felt like, like Solid Snake, Crash Bandicoot. It felt like the other consoles have got pin-up people, those poster child, for want of a better term. Then Microsoft did nothing, even maybe up till now. I'll say it's not hurt them as much now, but that's what these, like the fanboys and the console wars, focused on a lot of that. It was a generic Xbox. It was a generic games box kind of thing, wasn't it?
I think you're right, and you can almost reel off. If you're right. If you were to ask people what characters they remember, and this is why it then tips into that. Well, it's more about the games. It's your Banjo-Kazooies, it's your Battletoads, it's your Jak and Daxters, it's your God of War, it's your Kratos from God of War. All of these things, you're absolutely right. Sly Raccoon, you can almost go, well, I know I can pin them on a console, and it's either Sony or Nintendo. It's very rarely Microsoft. I suspect the reason I still own a PlayStation today, but it's purely because of the licensing around Spider-Man.
Yeah, there you go.
That was. I know that's the reason I bought a PS5.
And look, and I'm not saying that having these characters is what makes a console better or not the other. But what I think I'm saying is in the wider context of the console wars is that it's what do people hang on to say this is why my team is better than your team. And I think with the recognisable characters, I think that was an easy win for Sony fans, wasn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I love that analogy because you said that to me the other day and when we were talking about this episode, and it is very much that we're talking about fanboyism, but it is almost like football.
We have to find the competitiveness in everything in life, don't we?
Yeah, like that. Every simple thing. It's crazy. And I genuinely suspect, because I've never really cared about football, and that's probably controversial thing to say, it's just not something that floats my boat, right? And for some people it's not. It just doesn't interest me in the way it interests other people, and I don't get passionate about a team or a player on a team or a derby or whatever it is. And that's probably why I've never been involved in the whole console wars or fanboys, because again I just want to do what I want to do.
But do you know what's funny though, what I think from your perspective though is, I bet you can look at, especially when you've seen there's been trouble at a match or something, you say, sort of why do they get so tribal or why do they get so primal over 22 people running around on a pitch? But then look at our favourite hobby. Why are people getting so primal over a box that sits under a TV and that runs some pixels? Yeah,
totally. It's the same thing. I can't understand it.
Yeah.
I genuinely can't understand it. I'm like, Nintendo do some brilliant stuff. Yeah. Sony do some brilliant stuff. Microsoft do some brilliant stuff. But I'm not going to cut my nose off to spite my face and go, I don't like Sony as much, so no way I'm ever playing Spider-Man. Why would I do that? Do you know?
So do you think these people go out decked out in like clothing or merch or
yeah.
Like,
I don't know if they do, but I hope they do.
Yeah, send the pictures into Gaming Pod. Gaming Views Pod. Yeah,
Game Views. You can call it what we want now, Dan. We'll start a war because we'll have different tribes. It's genuinely is madness to me.
Yeah.
For me, it's it's this whole homogenized thing. It's a game. It's played on a different console. I can't wait for the day when I can just play everything on one thing. I genuinely can't.
Well,
and it will come.
I've got thoughts on that as well, so we'll probably say that towards the end, maybe.
All right, so let's skip on to, everyone knows what happened with the PlayStation and the Xbox. The Xbox put up a good fight, but essentially it was never going to compete against an established player like Sony. But what's interesting is what happens through the next kind of 3 generations, and that's the 360. I told you Microsoft couldn't count. The PlayStation 3 and Sony could. Then the Xbox One and PS4, and then the Xbox Series X. They gave up on numbers. Because I'm just going to do letters from now on. And the PlayStation 5. So the 7th generation, as it's known, was the 360 versus the PS3. I think Microsoft kind of stumbled coming out of the gate on that one. Not as spectacularly as they did the next one, but there was the whole controversy around the Red Ring of Death.
Yeah.
Which my console actually suffered from, one I had.
Oh, okay.
And I was just on the cusp of the warranty. And thankfully, I managed to convince the customer service to take it back and fix it and bring it back. So I was at a 360 for a couple of weeks. Sad time. but did compete strongly in sales. And I suspect that was because they had established Xbox Live by that point. And Sony were only just coming back in with their online services or the PS Network at the time. So I think there was, you can almost see how Microsoft would have done better, because they are the times when your Call of Duties and things like that are just starting to spin up and become more. Halo Online was very popular at the time. So you can almost see how one thing can almost change and tip a player over the edge in this faux war.
But, and I've realised I'm guilty in this episode alone. Earlier I said that I think the 360 kind of quotes won ultimately the battle against the PlayStation 3, and one means there's a battle and there's a competition. But I think you're right. I think it did. And I think because through history and then Microsoft got complacent, I think the team that's, to use a football analogy, it seems like the team that's on top does seem to get complacent. And I think with the PlayStation 3, Microsoft really went for some sort of like the big gaming, the online, the party chat.
Yeah.
It did feel like towards the end of its life, through media, through sort of like social circles, that the 360 felt like the victor, if we want to use that term, of that generation.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Because the thing that came up very quickly behind both of them, very unexpectedly, was Nintendo doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Right? Again, Nintendo like, I've got a popcorn bucket, but I'm also building a Wii. And we joked about the Wii and how it kind of just magically appeared in people's houses, and, you woke up to people playing tennis or whatever. But it's almost true, because it had that kind of a cultural impact. I remember news reports and stuff about the Wii. If it was about a PlayStation or an Xbox, it was generally about the launch. And it almost felt like a slow burn with the Wii. And but all of a sudden, and it was sold out everywhere, I know that. So you did have the whole, crazy for the launch thing. But then there were news reports about people playing, bowling in their room, or how it was great for elderly people playing tennis, or putting controllers through their TV screens.
Damaging TVs or pets with flying controllers across the room,
Exactly. But it was an insane thing, the cultural impact that the Wii had. And that definitely went, because you had people who were fanboys buying a Wii. Because they'd gone and tried it at someone's house, or they'd gone. So Nintendo were very clever about how they did this. They kept to their niche. They stayed with their family-friendly things, because they had the Miis. Was it the Miis who were little?
Yeah, yes, it was.
Right.
Yeah,
so they kept to the whole thing that they wanted to do, and almost snuck round the side and went, "Yeah, but look what we're doing. We're doing this Wii thing over here. Why don't you come and have a look?" And people were like, "Oh, well, I can do that," and almost forgot they had a PlayStation or an Xbox. And that proves categorically, at this point in time, it's now no longer about hardware and raw grunt and power. It's about knowing your market and playing your market really well. Not to mention undercutting them in price, because that becomes a big factor in this in that day and age, and this day and age now. So PlayStation 3 meanwhile had Blu-ray, had the PlayStation Network eventually. So they kind of came storming in from behind. And it felt like a bit of time when you were just glad to have one or the other. I had a PS3 and I had an Xbox. And the reason I got the PS3 was because I enjoyed Killzone. That was I loved Killzone, and trying to think of the other one, alien weapons and guns and stuff. And it was a bit
Haze?
No, not Haze. I hated Haze. It was rubbish. It was another game. I'll find it and I'll remember it, and
you'll add it in.
And I'll add it in. I'll edit it in.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of games that I really wanted to play, and so ended up getting a PlayStation, but still played more on the 360. And the blades and the 360 was where my heart was in that era. So it's interesting. I know that was kind of around the time where you got an Xbox, right? That was your.
Yeah. So I was PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, Xbox 360, totally skipped the PlayStation 3. Had a PlayStation 4 for a little bit of time, but basically the 360 was where I got in.
It's interesting. Why do you think you skipped the whole PS3? Like because we're talking about fanboys, and I've always had both, but it's a bit weird to almost jump ship.
Well, I was a bit weird.
You still are, dude. But, that's why we love you.
I think I said, yeah, somebody does. I had the PlayStation 2, absolutely loved it. And something's just clicked in my head about why. Right. So I then got rid of it because the controller was giving me like RSI. I was getting pain because it was small. Went onto PC, then got the 360 because a mate had it and the controllers was a lot chunkier and felt better. And the 360 was kind of, we said, it felt like Microsoft were really putting everything into that, and it just felt more marketable and more of the fun side of things. And yeah, a lot of people I knew, I got into like a group of people that were playing on the Xbox 360, so that all in party chat was a thing. Yeah, I think now the thing that's clicked with me is because the 360 we said is where, and the PlayStation 3 likely is where the online store side of things came into play.
Yeah.
I've now got a backlog, or I've got a catalogue of games that go back to the 360, and if I ever got rid of or left Xbox, I lose all that, if you know what I mean. And I think that's
so you
why
think
I
that's
stayed
tied
with them.
you into
I think it has, yeah.
that ecosystem? Wow.
I think it definitely has, because look, you know, I could have got a PlayStation 5, although at the time they were hard to get, but that's because of COVID, right? But I could have done, but I remember saying to people, I feel like I've got to get an Xbox because I'll lose 15 years worth of games or something. And I think that has probably tied me into...
That's interesting, because that's almost the second point around this diversification piece.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that ecosystem has kind of got hold of you and kind of gone, right, you can't go now, otherwise you're going to lose all that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I've not really considered that as a reason why, but it's really interesting.
It's kind of only just clicked when we're having this conversation as well, yeah.
That's why we have it down. Their views, right? Their views. So that's kind of your, I guess, mid-2000s, right? We're kind of 2010, somewhere around there with you. Nintendo had the Wii, as I said. And then Sony, it felt like Sony were on a bit of a roll, though, if I'm honest, because they did have, you know, your Uncharted's and your Gods of War, and, you know, had these games that kept people coming back for more. And they're certainly the games that I loved playing on it.
Big single-player epics, which is what you and I...
Exactly that. And the stuff that we love. Right, Uncharted in itself is just a phenomenal series. I've played all of them multiple times. I've played, all these things that keep players coming back, and that's what I'd love to see Microsoft do more of. In fairness, but
100%.
Because you know, I love what Sony do with that, and I do love what Microsoft do, but they more become kind of the RPG machine. And in a way, maybe the FPS machine, you know, whereas, like you said, those epic single-player stories.
Look, you know, having said what I said just a few minutes ago, I'm not going to sit here and say I wasn't looking over the fence at, you know, at the God of Wars, at the Uncharted. I mean, that was why when I said I briefly had a PlayStation, because we worked at a retailer, didn't we? I remember getting one cheap from there. I literally got it. I bought the Uncharted series, played that. I think I played The Last of Us. And then I realised I didn't have time for both. And so I got rid of the PlayStation because I didn't have the back catalogue on it. But I literally wanted to play those games. I'd been crying out to play them. So, yeah, absolutely. And we go back to what differentiates and what people can grab onto.
Exactly that. So, Xbox 360, PlayStation, all relatively calm, I guess, in the console wars sphere of things.
Yeah.
And then comes E3 2013.
Nintendo got more popcorn.
Nintendo got a truckload of popcorn for this one, because this is genuinely one of the defining moments of what we call the console wars, and has become quite iconic in the gaming community around what happened. And I have to admit, it is bloody funny.
It's funny. It's
very funny. So, Xbox, Microsoft rock up. Everyone's expecting new consoles, right? Let's be clear, right? Everyone knows this is the year they're launching. So Microsoft rock up on stage, a lot of swagger at E3, very confident in what they've created. Great powered machine. It's going to be the center of home entertainment in your house. It's going to be the thing that does everything. And I certainly loved it for what it did do. We've had this conversation before. But for some obscure reason, they decide on stage to pull out a gun and shoot themselves in the foot. In one of the biggest, I mean, they probably took half their leg off, to be honest, Dan. They unveil the Xbox One, and alongside the Xbox One, they announce the one word that people don't want to hear when you're launching a console, which is policies around ownership and connectivity.
Exciting
stuff, of which there are three. Two of them are mind-blowingly crazy. And the third one's a bit like, not a DVD player, dude. So the first one, an always online requirement. So your console, your Xbox One, the shiny new thing you've just paid a lot of money for, would require an always online internet connection. And it would have to check in at least once every 24 hours to allow the thing to function, even for single player disc-based games. So not stuff you purchased, right? If a connection couldn't be established, within that 24 hours, offline gaming would be disabled.
Yeah.
What?
Exactly.
It's just insane.
I think that's
right?
all you need to say to that is what, you know.
The next one, which is another stroke of genius from whoever at Microsoft was in charge at the time, and I think we know who it was, and I will get to him. They plan to allow game publishers to set the rules for reselling games. Now, this links back to something we talked about in a previous episode, which was the $10 game. So you could set your rule for how you wanted your game to be resold or used. So you could have restrictions on using games. So you couldn't use it on more than one console. So essentially DRM, right? This is what we're talking about. Digital rights management for console games on an Xbox. Or they would charge a fee for the reuse of that game. Additionally, this one blows my mind. Sharing disc-based games with friends was limited.
Yeah.
A disc could only be given to a friend who had been on your user's friend list for at least 30 days, and each game could only be lent out once. Right? Not once to that person, just once.
Just once, yeah.
And the other thing that was a bit insane was they were also going to region lock the systems, which it was kind of a bit meh, whatever, but very, very silly. So there was, as you'd imagine, quite a response at the E3 event itself. No one cheered at those moments, weirdly. And the public outcry from the gaming community was, and I quote, immediate and severe. There was widespread frustration and anger over those policies. What was even better, and this is something Microsoft have done very, very recently as well, Xbox chief, the guy to blame, Don Matrick, infamously, stated that people unable to get a consistent internet connection, fortunately, Microsoft had a product for those people.
Yeah.
It was called the Xbox 360.
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right.
So you can't come with us on this journey because you haven't got a connection, but you can use the old one. It's fine. It'll be all right. My God. I mean, the man was a raging moron, but probably not just him, right? Because even more recently, the chief of Microsoft came out after the whole redundancies debacle and made comments about it. And then they advertised jobs in the AI areas of and I'm like, how insensitive and stupid do you have to be?
Also, going back to the Don Matrick bit, is like I said, not just him, because ultimately someone will have written that speech. I don't
of course.
necessarily think,
Yeah.
and other people will have read that. They would, other people have okayed it. So it would have gone through a whole board of people, and they all thought that was okay, or were too afraid to speak up, which is probably a lot of that.
Yeah.
But it's what I was saying, Shu, where it feels like the wars have passed the baton, because it feels like who's on top just implodes or gets so complacent that they think they can then do what they want, and it felt like that was a key thing there.
Totally. Just a moment of madness from Microsoft, who were on a bit of a high coming off the 360. So anyway, Sony did what they do so well in these times, and they pivot. They rock up at their event, which happened to be the day after, and Jack Tretton gets up. So Jack Tretton, CEO of Sony Computer Entertainment at the time, and basically opens his speech saying that the PS4 would not impose any restrictions on used games, they'd not require an online check-in, and would not stop working if not authenticated within 24 hours, right? A direct counter to what Microsoft had just announced. And the crowd went nuts. Now, in fairness, probably a crowd full of few publishers, a lot of magazine editors and online reviewers, and Sony fanboys. So you see, it's the crowd that's ripe for it. But to be honest, if I'd have been in that crowd, I'd probably have cheered, because I'm like, Microsoft had just lost me.
And I remember at the time, whether it was all hearsay or that, but like you said, they pivoted. So they were probably thinking of some of the stuff. Basically, I'm guessing what I'm trying to say is, do you think history was made because they went second? Think maybe they might have had ideas for some of that down the line?
Maybe. I mean,
do you know what I mean?
We'll never know, right? We'll never know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they'd come up together and gone, we're going to do this. Yeah, that's a great idea. And then Microsoft did it, and Sony went, we ain't doing it. Or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea. If only we'd have thought of that. Yeah,
we're not getting screwed over like we did with Nintendo again.
Yeah. And also, right, I think it's fair to say, and this is where people are going to disagree, but the gaming press and media has generally always, I think, had a soft spot for Sony as well and PlayStation, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that speech, I can absolutely understand why it got that reaction. And it was a real sort of two fingers up to Microsoft, right?
I think what was brilliant is not a week later, Sony do, again, their marketing team have always been brilliant, right? They've just always been brilliant. From the weird alien Scottish girl.
Get progress by proxy. Land on your own moon.
Through all the way through. I love Sony's marketing team. So they create a video that goes completely viral, which is two Sony executives. So it's Adam Boyes and Shuei Yoshida, who are basically passing a game back and forwards towards each other with the caption, "It's this easy. Thank you." This is how you share a game, which was just brilliance. Just sheer brilliance. And then to rub salt in the wound, they also announced that the PS4 is going to be £100 cheaper than the Xbox One. So what happens after that, Dan? You know what happens. Microsoft, after saying, and Larry Herb is responsible for this and probably one of the greatest GIFs of all time, saying, it's built into the system. We've produced all these consoles. We can't just flick a switch.
Yeah.
The next day, we've taken it out. So the meme, and I will put it up, can't just flick a switch, flicks a switch. It was like...
And do you know what? You've just started another war because you said it, and I know that's what they're called as well. You called them GIFs.
I'm sure they're called GIFs.
The creator of them says they're called GIFs, but everyone else will argue that they're GIFs. But the person created it.
I hate being right, but it feels like I am. What does Joey think they're called?
Well, I'm not going to say anything, but I'm kind of with you because if the creator of it calls it that, I think we should let him have it. But yeah, back on track. So
can I just say, just before you go on, Balatro, carry on.
So yeah, the flicker switch, but that was also done for the Kinect.
Kinect, yeah.
So they did it for the DRM, and then also because the Kinect takes 10% extra compute power or something. It's like, no, we can flick a switch and give you that. So this switch, they had a pretty powerful switch at Microsoft, didn't they?
It was the biggest switch. What a way to really screw yourself over in a pivotal moment in kind of the console wars.
When they were doing so well at the time, that's the
and
thing.
they were doing very well. I mean, you're absolutely right, but ultimately very funny.
And also, going back to that quote where they said, for people who haven't got that, we've got a product called the Xbox 360. I mean, way to crap on the 360 because basically what you're saying, everyone who's got one, that's an inferior product then, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't have the good stuff because you haven't got an internet connection. Why don't I need an internet connection? Can't I just play game? No, you can't do that. But you can do it on the older one and you won't get any of the new shit. So, sorry.
And look, we said in our episode last week, didn't we, broadband and stable, fast broadband wasn't in most of the households till quite late on as well, was it? So
totally. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they were just looking at a single market or what, but yeah, maybe just the US or whatever. Yeah. I have to admit, I did love my Xbox One, and I've said before, I specifically loved the HDMI in to allow me to, watch my Sky at the time on the Xbox without them to faff around with HDMI switches and all that sort of thing. So I did love what they did. I just didn't like the way they announced it, and it was just.
We've said before, they probably were ahead of their time on certain things.
Yeah,
it was just a bad mess. Yeah.
Oh. Cracking, like just a complete cock up. I mean,
can you imagine? Yeah. Can you imagine? They probably had on their cue card. It probably said, "Say this, wait for applause." Okay, yeah. What do I do now? Yeah,
it's like one of my jokes, Dan. Is like just the crickets. Just what happened. So that was 2013, and one of the funniest moments, I think. Now, looking back on it, one of the funniest moments. Everyone looked in horror at the time, but one of the funniest moments ever to occur out of an E3. Just like, God, Microsoft are a bunch of idiots. And through that generation, the evolution of certain things that Microsoft now do really well that's diversified them away from what Sony do and especially what Nintendo do. So now you've got moving into 2020 and the launch of the PS5, the Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch, and moving on from the Wii U, you've got this diversification of markets, which is the thing we spoke about earlier, which I think is the thing that turns the whole idea of a console war on its head. Because that now it is no longer around raw processing power and grunt, or I've got a Blu-ray player, you've got a DVD player or an HD DVD. It's no longer become about specifics because parity-wise, they're very similar. So we move into a world that's not hardware-based, but more software-based. Even back on the Xbox One, it was motion control, right? Or it was Blu-ray movie. Now we move into both consoles having SSDs, so speed of transition of data is much, much quicker, and it moves into a world of ray tracing or resolution-based war, which is, well, I can do 4K, and if you really push it, when they finally bring some out, I can do 8K, or I can do... It becomes much more about the capability of the software on the screen, because they've almost reached a point where graphics are kind of like, you know, I can do really pretty graphics on either. I can make them look beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? You only have to look at the Gran Turismos and Forzas of the world to kind of go, comparatively, they're both stunning, right? They both look almost lifelike. So where else do I go with it? Well, now it's about ray tracing or shadows, or it's about, you know, how fast I can run at what res. And the reason I didn't pick up a PS5 Pro, because I'm like, it's a little bit more powerful than... Why? The PS5 is beautiful.
There's two things about the modern gen that stick out for me. One was, do you remember the reboot of the Tomb Raider games? So, okay, when I say modern, that was...
Rise of the Tomb Raider,
yeah. But do you remember it was all about hair physics? It was the fact that it was Lara's hair moves realistically. And I mean, that's where we're getting...
beautiful hair ever.
And I think it was... I've been trying to think the whole episode, and I think I remember it now. I think it was a Spider-Man game. Do you remember there was a whole thing about...
Yes, there was.
A puddle.
Yeah. Puddles.
Wasn't it a puddle?
Yeah.
And like the
Puddle
PS5 couldn't do it as well as the PS4, was it? And like we're arguing over reflections in a puddle in a game.
It was mad. And again, this is endemic of where we've got to. It wasn't the PS4 and PS5, although it was. And this has happened for quite a while, to be honest. I think Killzone did it as well. But where they release a trailer of something and someone captures that image, and because now you've got the ability to capture 4K, or you've got the ability to capture, you know, the high-res images from a trailer, and you're now doing comparatives of actual gameplay. And they're going, yeah, but that reflection doesn't match that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how often do I play a game and spend a time looking in a puddle?
There was a puddle?
Yeah. Exactly that, right? Or I'm zipping past a window at high speed on a web. I'm more interested in crashing into the building than I am in looking at my reflection to see if it looks exact. Has it got as many pixels as the one they had on an? I personally don't care. Maybe this is why I'm not a part of this whole thing. But I'm kind of like, it's a bit of a madness to get to the point where you're that bothered, because now you've got Sony fanboys turning on Sony. Because that didn't come from the Microsoft community, because they didn't care. They didn't have Spider-Man. I'm not bothered. Yeah. But you got the Sony community going, but you promised me this, and I haven't got this. Why haven't I got this?
And this is what, again, we have to, when I say we, I'm talking about the wider people, it's like we have to find something to argue about. And it's like, I can't boast about the puddle physics in this game to my mate. Is that what we got to?
But I guess it is, we talked about it being quite tribal and stuff like football. I guess it's the same thing, because there are things about the person who shouts at the players on the pitch because they're not doing the thing that they think they should be doing. It's almost like that. It's like the Sony fans shouting at Sony because you haven't met the requirement that you promised me.
4-0. I wanted 5. That's
exactly right. It's just a bit insane. So you've got this wonderful diversification, and I think this is where we now come up to where we are now, and this wonderful thing where you've got Nintendo playing in their own pond, like the kid who's kind of just sitting there playing with his toys and doesn't really care what everyone else is doing because he wants to block out the world, right? And that's what they do so beautifully. They've gone, I'm not even interested in creating a console anymore. I'm just going to do this hybrid weird thing that you can pick up and play, but also play on your TV if you want to, but you don't really want to because it's a handheld. Why would you want to do that? So they've gone completely off-piste at this point. Sony are kind of going, well, I've just built a white powerhouse and that's going to do the job. Microsoft is sitting alongside them going, well, I'm going to do that as well, but actually what I'm going to do is probably not going to be as powerful or working quite the same way, but I have got this massive online thing that I can just charge people to play subscription-wise now. Yeah. So they're pivoting over to, Game Pass as their model of excellence, and they're kind of, well, I don't care because I don't have to sell games anymore. I can rent them. And I'm laughing because people are paying a lot of money to do that. And I'll buy a couple of studios. So when the exclusivity deals eventually do run out, and they will run out, I could, if I chose to, keep all my toys and not let anyone else play with them. And PlayStation, Sony, meanwhile, are sitting there going, that's all right, you do that. But I'm going to continue making fantastic games like Bloodborne and Spider-Man and Uncharted and Last of Us. I'm going to keep doing that because that's what our players want. So this market now has diversified into this three-pronged thing. And you can pick your poison. You can choose what place you want to play in now. So that war that we thought was happening has transitioned from being this hardware, physical, game-based thing into something completely different. It's almost transformed itself. So it's not what we thought it was anymore. It's not the Mario and Sonic fanboys. It's transformed into something completely different that I think will end up benefiting all of us.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you now. So I think what's happened is the companies, especially Microsoft, are dropping the console war bit because a few years they don't have to release a console. I know they keep, we keep joking about it and this is an Xbox, etc. Well, the fact is, the move they've made to make their games available, or some of them at the moment, but to put their games on PlayStations. Well, as an Xbox owner, you can buy a PlayStation because Microsoft's still getting money. And if in 5 years, 6 years' time, they aren't spending the billions on producing hardware, then that money they're getting from PlayStation owners is still money, right? And the battle at the moment now is going to be between the fans, and that is what we're seeing, because you've got the Sony fans, PlayStation fans saying, well, we're getting all your games now, and well, like Microsoft is saying, and Microsoft fans saying, well, you're paying for our Game Pass. Basically.
You're paying for it.
Yeah.
So,
so it's
that just means
bizarre.
Microsoft can go and buy another studio.
Yeah.
Do you know
that's what I
doing?
think is going to happen. I think ultimately Microsoft now have realised what's the point in the whole battle. We can make money by having our games everywhere.
Exactly. It's less about this hardware supremacy piece, and it's about building a comprehensive, sticky digital ecosystem that people will jump to. Hence your point earlier about, well, actually, the reason I think I probably did stay with the 360 in Microsoft is because I had this great back catalogue. It's the same thing. I pay 13 quid a month. I've got access to a massive catalogue of games that if I get bored, I go and pick one up and play it. I don't have to go and trade it. I don't have to buy it. I rent it.
But do you think, though, that ultimately gaming will suffer in some way? Because let's say Microsoft do that. Say 5 years they abandon hardware. I can play all my games on the PlayStation, or I can play all my games on the TV. We have said ourselves that even throwing Nintendo and Sega back in the day, and Nintendo even now, these companies are constantly pushing each other. Do we think that innovation comes from competition, or do we think now the market is changing? We're in a different landscape entirely, so we're not going to be in that kind of world. The innovation is minor rather than...
I think we've already seen it be rather minor, haven't we? I mean, it's not, the generational leaps are getting smaller and smaller. Those gaps are getting smaller and smaller. The graphical fidelity is getting less and less between systems. When you get to lifelike realism, where do you go from there?
Yeah, I guess
it
so.
has to be about the gameplay or the capability. It has to be about the experience.
Yeah, I guess so. What I'm saying is like the Switch. The Switch was probably one of the last big innovations, was it? Because it took the gaming into a different format, so the handheld and the docked and the Joy-Cons, etc.
Yeah.
And we potentially won't see something like that again, possibly. I mean, we're going to get the handhelds. We've got the Ally X.
Yeah, I think if you do, it's inevitably going to come from Nintendo. Right? They'll probably release a Virtual Boy 2. But they're the guys who are going to do that. But even they feel like they're getting a bit dried out. I spoke very briefly. I didn't do a full review, but I spoke very briefly about my experience with the Switch 2. It's not an innovation. It's an upgrade. It's literally just a nicer, more refined Switch with a little bit more grunt. That's all it is. Because don't get me wrong, it's a great thing to have, but it's not innovative.
Yeah. Because that's where surely all the expense and the budget's got to go into is developing and producing this hardware, right?
Yeah, potentially. But then how many innovations really feel like innovations and not just gimmicks? The last two big ones that happened, sans the Switch, were the Wii U and the gamepad and the health thing that you trod on and the shooter thing that you slotted your gamepad into, and the Kinect. Both failed catastrophically.
Yeah, I guess probably
they were gimmicky. They just became...
The last big one was probably... the PlayStation controllers, even there, they don't... How many people use them? But you had the sound and the touchpad on the PlayStation.
Yeah, the PS5 ones were
motion.
big... they've got gyroscopic and they're... Yeah, the PS5 ones are quite impressive, but if that's the amount of your innovation in what you're developing is, I've made the controllers a bit more rumbly, or the
But
triggers
how
a bit
often
more
do you
squishy.
use that though? I guess you use it a few times, and then
Totally. I would argue the last real innovation in gaming, like innovation that stuck, was actually the Wii nunchucks.
Okay, all right, yeah.
I can't think of anything since then.
Yeah.
That's really made you go, wow. I mean, VR's been about forever, right? But none of the big players have really bought into it. Even Sony did it twice and forgot about it. It was almost like, you know, they released this bit of kit, exceptionally expensive, especially the PSVR 2. And I know because I've got one and it's gathering dust. You've got this bit of kit that you've bought and invested in, and I played on it for a couple of days. I played Star Wars and a couple of other things. Even Sony went, did we do a virtual reality thing? Did we? And they went, yeah, a load of people bought it, and now they're all complaining that we haven't done anything with it.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't remember we did one. You know, and so it's kind of gone off the boil. So it's a bit, you know, I can't think of anything that the big three, even recently, have done. But you know, so I don't know where else you go other than that ecosystem piece, because Microsoft have got it down. Right, they know what they're doing with that, right, and they're making hand over fist their cash. Sony are catching up, and they've got their platinum tier and everything else for their PSPs. Nintendo are now, you know, they've done theirs. I mean, and even they're monetizing everything. I mean, how the fuck do you monetize chat? Right, and that's what they've done with the Switch 2. They're like, well, you can't talk to your friends unless you pay us money to do it.
Well, the Switch 2 isn't like the instruction manual. Don't you have to pay for that or something? Isn't it an online thing?
Yeah. So the equivalent of Astrobot, which came free with the PS4, 5, whichever one it was, you have to pay for. Nintendo Switch 2 Tour or whatever it's called. No, thanks. I'm right. I'm pretty sure I know how to use a fucking Switch.
Yeah.
I mean, you've basically just replicated what the original one was and stuck a mouse on the control. I know how to use a mouse. I don't need to buy a game to. So I don't know where they go, because graphics are kind of reaching a pinnacle. You know, it won't be long until everything is realistic. I don't want to see realistic games and realism in games all the time. I like that uncanny valley piece for a lot of the things that I play.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want an exact replica of Nathan Drake as an actor.
Yeah,
you know, I don't want Tom Holland running around on a script. It will feel like, you know, like in the old days where you used to, like Mortal Kombat, where you used to get, you know, proper images of people. I don't want that. I don't want digitized form in my games.
I just think, to go back to my point, people say, why would they? But I have said now, I'm unlikely to get a PlayStation, not because I don't want one, just because of what I've got tied up in the Xbox ecosystem. So if Sony were to start putting more games on, like they put Death Stranding and I bought it, they're going to get my money. So why shouldn't they start putting the games onto the Xbox? And I know, you know, like I said, I know it's crazy, but that's what Xbox have started doing. They've realised that now. Money is money, and that's what all they want, right? Is money.
It is all about the dollar.
Yeah.
You know, what was once a fun thing to develop for people, you know, and you see it more and more, sadly, in the news across the piece. You know, you see more and more it's about the amount of cash they can make off of it, whether it's through Fortnite or Roblox or whatever. You know, it's all about filling the coffers and not entertaining people. I mean, some of them still do it really well, and I think that's why we have such a passion for some of the more indie studios and games, because they still have that.
Yeah.
But look, we have talked long and hard, but as I said, I don't think there is such a thing as the console wars as they were. I think we've moved into new territory. It was once defined by this aggressive hardware competition and exclusivity, and that even exclusivity is going the way of the dinosaur now. And now it's evolved into this kind of complex ecosystem-driven rivalry. Broader technological market shifts. Yeah, absolutely. With it being more about digital services, subscription models, and cross-platform accessibility, which we see every day now, right? Helldivers coming out on the Xbox and Gears of War going over to PlayStation. And
I mean, something you just said there, that's maybe we get videos of an Xbox side by side with a PlayStation loading a game and see which can get into like the menu screen the fastest. I mean,
mad.
You know, it's this world. But I have
that is not going to sway me on which one I buy. Weirdly,
no, because I'm probably making a snack while it's loading it.
Yeah. Yeah, get a cup of tea. Cheers.
I did have a few other examples of companies hitting at each other, though. So I'm just going to have to scoot around a bit. So, yeah, Xbox hit back. So after, I think, the PlayStation, Microsoft then hit back at Sony over backwards compatibility and cross-play restriction, because Sony initially didn't want to do that, did they? So I know Microsoft got on the bandwagon. So Xbox then did start using the tagline better with Xbox Game Pass. Nintendo had some subtle shade. So I think, again, it said in 2017, while Sony was criticised for no crossplay, Nintendo released a Minecraft Switch commercial showing players enjoying cross-platform play with Xbox. In 2020, Microsoft offered smart delivery, and so they said buy game once, play on both Xbox One and Series X for free. Now, do you remember, because Sony did paid upgrade paths, didn't they, between PS4 and PS5? I'd forgotten. So Microsoft subtweeting Sony said you'll only need to buy a game once. That's consumer friendly. So again, a hit back at that.
Yeah, it was like $10 or something to upgrade to it.
Yeah. Where else? I had a couple of other things. We've said about, Microsoft spectacularly saying wrong things. So Jim Ryan, who was Sony's CEO on the Xbox strategy, he subtly mocked Microsoft's focus on backwards compatibility. He said, why would anyone want to play old games? And Sony reversed course and embraced backwards compatibility shortly after. And there was just a couple more. Atari v Nintendo in the late 80s. Atari ran an ad saying, break free from Nintendo's control, choose Atari.
Good job Atari weren't xenophobic. That's
Well, and I'll just do the one more, the Dreamcast era. So you said it earlier about the PS2 emotion engine. So Sega ran an advert saying, Dreamcast is real, emotion is just a buzzword. So...
Good old Sega. Well done, they stuck around.
Yeah. And one other thing that has been bugging me again that I've been wanting to say, we mentioned popcorn earlier.
Yes.
I saw a thing today. So how popcorn buckets are becoming a thing in cinemas for films?
Yeah.
What's the game that's coming out soon? Is it Ghost of Yotei?
Yeah.
Apparently that's going to have its own popcorn bucket.
You're kidding me.
No, like just a la the films. Apparently it's going to be the first game with its dedicated popcorn bucket.
Jeez. I mean, how long are the cutscenes? Do you know what I mean? Is it another Metal Gear Solid? And we're going to have to sit through an hour and a half of cutscenes to get halfway through the game.
Oh, dear.
I'll tell you what I did see, just very, very quickly. I saw one of the best pieces of faux advertising, errors in advertising.
Yeah.
So most people would be aware that the Marvel are releasing the Fantastic Four.
Yep.
And Fortnite put out a great advertisement because they would normally release skins for games, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can tell where this is going, but basically they released an advertisement that said Fantastic Four skins coming soon. Which I just had me in absolute pieces. Probably should have saved that for after this episode.
Sorry, and I've just seen your Spider-Man there. Now you've moved a bit. How cool is that? Has he just been hanging there the whole episode?
The whole episode, he's listening in. Good old Peter.
He said that puddle was important.
It was. He's moaning about puddles. Oh my God. Right, so look, people, console wars. Love them, hate them, part of them, not part of them. We've all been through them. But, except for Dan and I, apparently. We don't care about them. Yeah, look, there's always going to be people who side with one side or the other and, will have an opinion on it, right?
Yeah.
But I think the point we were trying to make is we really don't give a shit, right? You just enjoy doing what you do what you do, love what you do. Right?
Love gaming.
Whatever system.
Love gaming.
Love gaming, that's all you need to do. But hopefully it's been a little bit insightful around console wars and, what's happened throughout the ages to make it seem like it was something that maybe isn't. And look, I hope those three big players stick around for a very long time to come.
No, and I was going to say, and let us know if you want more popcorn buckets with your games. Come up with suggestions. Let us know.
Popcorn buckets with my games, then. It's just not a thing. Can you imagine the controller after that?
That's what's going to unite the gamers. Popcorn buckets.
Yeah, bringing out cross-platform popcorn buckets. Christ, this is going weird. Dan Francisco, anything else from you?
Just hello to everyone. Thank you for listening. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you to all our subscribers. I got a couple of shout outs this week. Darren and Nardeep at work, thank you very much for subscribing. It's very much appreciated.
Lewis and Trevor.
And Lewis and Trevor. I've never met you, but you seem like lovely people for subscribing. And as we said before, please do like and subscribe. Like I said, it won't mean much to you, just another subscription on the YouTube channel, but it means the world to us. And plus, you get to see our new content as it comes up. Keep your eyes out for gaming reviews, because our marketing department is the same one as Microsoft's probably. But we promise we won't number them.
And you can share this podcast with friends.
Oh, you can. You're right, Dan. It's really easy. There's a little button that looks like a box with an arrow in it.
Yeah.
Doesn't take anything more than that. Right, I've just realised I've been way off camera leaning back when you talked about Spider-Man. Right, I think we'll call it there. Everybody, we are overheating rapidly, but have a wonderful day, rest of your week, life, whatever you do, and we will see you shortly and again on Gaming Views.
Dan and Dan with a gaming flair, pixel dreams and worlds to share, joystick tales and button cues. Welcome to Gaming Views. Level up, we're on the go. Power ups in the audio flow. From the retro to the new reviews, it's a life of gaming.